Well, good afternoon, everyone. How are you guys doing? Perhaps you could introduce yourselves and perhaps speak a little to how what you do relates to the topic at hand. We could start with you, sir.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Silungwe, and I'm one of the co-founders at Good Nature Agro. You just heard from my other co-founder, Carl, who was on the previous panel. I specialize in marketing and communications at Good Nature Agro. I've worn multiple hats from its inception. We are turning 8 years old next year. And I did a lot of the talent search and also sort of implementation of processes and design until about 2 years ago. So I still see myself as a people person, and this is mostly why I'm also on this panel. I love human resources, and I love talent. So a little bit about what we do, I guess, is that Good Nature Agro is a agro-social enterprise and work with small-scale farmers in the country. We are mostly in the Eastern provinces where we started from, but we started covering the country and work with these small-scale farmers to produce seed and also commodities. So we work with about 21,600 farmers across Zambia. 4,000 of them producing seed in the Eastern province, and we are working with legume seed. So we produce beans, groundnuts, cowpeas, anything basically that is a legume. So that's a little bit about us, and I think I'll leave it to the next panelist.
Thank you. So my name is Musonda Kambikambi, and I am an organizational psychologist and human resource expert. I'm currently serving as the people lead at 1 Acre Fund while doing my PhD in organizational psychology. So I've been working in people, specifically in cultivating and attracting and retaining talent for over 6 years. This is something I'm very passionate about and also do in my spare time and write about. So yeah, I think that's why I'm here and excited to be here. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. I know I don't have an issue being audible. I teach kids for a living. My name is Regina Mtonga. I am co-founder and director at Asikana Network. And as the name suggests, it's young women. We've been running for over 9 years. In fact, October of this year, we celebrated 9 years of existence. However, I always tell people we feel 4 years old because 4 years ago we rebranded. And the stories that we tell start from about 4 years ago. So the organization basically does exactly what the topic of this panel is about, and it's helping young women learn skills and become employable, basically. That's what we've been doing, except we use technology, exclusively technology, and we try to make technology look really fun to children, look really achievable for women, and not something that used to be taught as only for boys, like we were taught as we were younger. Briefly, that's what we do, and I'll end there.
Chris, perhaps you could introduce yourself as well.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Chris Chileshe. I'm the founder of The Zig. The Zig is a consulting and professional services company, and we are also working on building products for the African continent. I'm excited to be on the panel with all the other guests and panelists. And yeah, I'll leave my introduction to there.
Great. Thanks once again for being on this panel. So I guess we'll start. The title is How to Cultivate, Attract, and Retain Talent for Zambia's Entrepreneurial Ecosystem. So I guess the first question, and it's a general one, you guys feel free to chime in, no specific order. Why is this important? Why is it worth discussing?
I think all of us will be quite, I think, interested in that question. Most of us are employed or at least doing some kind of business that allows you to bring on talent. And it's quite important to actually figure out what you want to bring, how, for example, how to bring in people or tasks that need to be managed. I think the core thing is we really have to have talent that matters most to basically achieve our goals. Let me put it this way. A lot of entrepreneurs have dreams, and I have been part of building this agriculture organization. And talent has been one of those things that has taken a big brunt of our operations. We started, for example, just the two of us, me and Carl, and trying to build this agriculture organization. And we've won pretty much every hat that is available. And building the talent that needs to grow the business to where it's supposed to be has been learning and also basically getting from different people that we have. So one of the things that that excites me basically is making sure that we have processes.
I think we've all heard this, all of us. People are an organization's greatest asset. So while it's something that's constantly said, I don't necessarily think it's something that's given that level of priority or significance, but I think we can all agree that the quality of a team, an organization, a nation is solely dependent on the human capital that you have within. So this is something that's very, very important because, and I know that people from different parts of organizations might beat me, but I would say it almost doesn't matter the strategy that your organization has if you are unable to, A, bring in the right people, and B, be able to actually grow them so that they're actually able to impact the organization. Yeah.
I do also agree that it really depends on what your workforce is. However, I think I'm living, breathing example of when an organization has a plan, has a mission, has a strategy, but doesn't know how to execute them. And one of the reasons that we rebranded is because we used to get funding. We were making money 8 years ago, 9 years ago, but we didn't know what to do with it. There's no point of having $1 million in your account if you don't know how to use it. And that's one of the reasons that I'm so passionate about my organization, because this is exactly what we're trying to teach women. Most of the women that I encounter, by the way, are women who, after learning a new skill, will spend about 6 months to a year teaching this woman a new programming language, for example. And after a year, she's able to start making money that she wasn't able to make. We've achieved something, right? The problem we always encounter, and this is why we always partner even with financial institutions and all that, is that a woman who's never touched money before is touching, say, 5,000, 10,000 kwacha. If we don't teach her how to use that new, we've given her the skills in tech. If we don't teach her how to use that 10,000, I promise you in less than a month, she'll be back saying, I'm not making enough money, or I think that what you guys did is nice, but you didn't help me enough. So I always find topics like this very interesting because I feel Asikana Network is the perfect example of what not to do, because that's exactly what we did. We had the money, we didn't know what to do with it, and would run out of it very, very quickly in the organization. That was a long time ago. We're using it much better now, just to clarify. Yeah, so it's one of the reasons that I always say use Asikana Network as an example of talent that did exist. We did have the talent. All founders of the organization, by the way, are actually qualified software engineers, which sounds nice on paper, but it also means that we're not used to being in front of the screen. We're not used to public speaking. We're also not very good at money, but we had to hire somebody for that. It took us 4 years to realize that we had to hire somebody to handle our money, because we realized our talents were kind of more in the background and not so much in the finance section.
Chris?
I'll chime in. Yeah, thanks, Mwiya. I think, so I'll take the example of the ZIG. Our mission is to unlock Africa's potential through technology, but that potential begins with the individual, the people. So we think fundamentally that the growth and the capacity to build and to achieve more is inherently at the individual level. So all of our contributions collectively will amount to something greater. You know, the sum of all the parts sort of thing, right? So we invest, and our business is a people business. We invest a ton of resources in making sure that we can help provide the type of training and help provide the type of skills and leveling up that allows people to reach and maximize their potential. So on our mission to unlock Africa's potential, we have to start at the individual level and helping individuals unlock their potential. So, you know, this particular topic is near and dear to my heart, particularly for that reason. I think in order for us to achieve what we want to be able to do, we're going to have to spend a disproportionate amount of our time helping people not only just reach, but also realize and recognize their potential. And when you look at it from that perspective, you also understand that that potential is then also unlimited. So I think, you know, we've been very, very keen on trying to help people see that, you know, beyond kind of what they think what they think their potential is, and then helping them understand that their potential and their competition isn't limited to their geographic region. They should also expand sort of their ideas beyond their, you know, their borders and look beyond to say, okay, what are other people achieving? What are other people doing? And then how can we help sort of accelerate that path towards maximizing an individual's potential within the organization?
Thanks for that, Chris. So I guess the next question following on that is, in your experiences, and you're all coming at this from different perspectives and I guess backgrounds, how have you sought to find the human capital that you need? How have you cultivated it? So what are the strategies you employed to find and then to cultivate? So we'll start with those two, and then we can follow up.
How have we found our talent? So interesting thing about Asikana Network is that our talent exists everywhere, and you'd think that it's easy to find, but it was, we had a rude awakening to just how little women wanted to admit that they liked stuff like this. You know, we call ourselves, the founders call ourselves unicorns, because we were privileged to grow up in backgrounds where our parents were very encouraging academically. So we thought the world was like that. Then we got to college and realized, I'm the only girl here, I'm the youngest in this one. And then this is exactly where we started the organization. So for us, our talent is all around us. It's in the primary schools, it's in the secondary schools, it's even in women who are already working. And ironically, it's mostly in women who are not in technology. We have a lot of those women in our network who are not in technology, but just find it so intriguing, or they wanted to study it, and someone very carefully, these days we carefully steer away women from that. You wouldn't outright say you can't study that, but we very nicely and carefully steer them away from technology. To always be one excuse after another. And how we have cultivated it is we have heavily invested in a lot of time in mentorship, something that founders did not have, and we do not want to repeat that. We always try to grow our base of mentors, of women who have achieved, women who have done, because women, I don't know about men, but women learn a lot by seeing. So I cannot come to a woman and tell you to be something that you cannot see. So I have to be an example. As a girl who grew up in the streets of Lubuto in Ndola, raised by my grandmother, I'm sitting here, I should be an example. That's how we try to cultivate those women. And of course, giving them the skills that they actually need. Words are just words. We must actually try to give them those skills and eventually take them back to school. We never discourage the school thing. We just say, don't put it at the front, but we never ever say, don't go to school. This is not a Mark Zuckerberg situation, please.
I think to come in, attracting talent is dependent on the type of talent you are looking for. So I've worked in numerous organizations where, for example, you will be trying to source a managing director to manage an organization for over 1,000 employees. And in the same breath, sometimes you'll be looking for a general worker to work at a farm in the middle of Chisamba. So obviously the manner in which you're going to look for these two people is going to be very different. So for something I'm going to categorize as common talent, which is indicative of people who have that skill in
inbound. So for example, if I put out an ad today and I know I'm going to get 2,000 applications based on this, I would encourage people to not prioritize or spend so much time on that, because it's really easy to find. You could literally stick a poster at a church and say, I'm looking for this type and type of person, and you get X number of applications. In cases where you're looking for people who are more rare, whose skills are harder to find, where the market demand exceeds the actual talent on the ground, I found that reaching out to nodes and people you may know and other people in the industry is actually helpful. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, I think I understand the question a little bit better. That first question kind of threw me off there. I think from my experience, we've had a lot of ways that we've had to sort of attract talent, and I'll tell you this. One of the easiest ways is to make sure that the job that you're putting out there is clear enough for the people to get it. Secondly, your organization is very, very clear about its objectives, and you have everything out there for the public to read. So what makes it more attractive also is things like values. One of the things that we seek out at Good Nature is to make sure that people that we're getting are farmer-centric. For example, they are clear enough about the objectives that we have. They're going to be working with farmers no matter what department that they're in, no matter what area they're in, they're going to have to interact with these farmers. The clarity also on how ambitious we are in terms of what we think about our innovations and the creative nature that we have as an organization, not just day-to-day farming, but farming for the future as well. So that kind of aspect makes sure that the talent that you're getting is really attracted to the job. Then, speaking from a bit of history, when you're founders, especially in the beginning, you tend to look for certain traits that are like you. So in the very beginning, I think I would say the very first 3 or 4 years, we had a lot of people that were like us. But that meant that the environment that we were in was kind of dictated by what we did, and did not have people that were actually critical in terms of like how much they criticize what we do or how they can add to the dreams that we had. So with a business and attracting talent, you need a lot of dynamic pieces. So people that you add on to the group should be able to come in with their different skill sets. But also, lastly, I would say an important part of attracting talent is looking also at the character that you give out, in as much as also you want the character that you want in. So things like integrity, the kind of transparency that you have, all those kind of traits are very important if you're going to attract talent. Now, how do you nurture it? That's another thing that goes in. So at Good Nature, what we've done is we have people that have been in the business for quite a long time. So they have skills that they can share. They have knowledge that they can share. They have time also, which is quite a big resource when you're looking at talent management and bringing them in. So these people spend time to mentor, they coach, they also take people around and play a very big role when it comes to things like orientation when you're bringing the talent. So that has been what we do, I think, from our experience.
Chris?
Yeah, so for us, how we attract talent. Effectively, you know, we believe that birds of a feather flock together. So we weigh very heavily on our employees to provide referrals. For one, I think when you are a good steward of sort of your culture and your work environment, your employees become champions of that work environment and culture. And so they will, you know, they'll actually go and do recruiting for you, right? And they will try to bringing people that will operate at the same level. So I place a premium on employee referrals because I understand that, okay, this person knows the culture, and so therefore they can identify other people who would assimilate well with how we operate. So I think, and fundamentally that boils down to creating a workplace that people enjoy, creating a workplace that people want to come to, that people are excited about talking about, because you know, it pays dividends down the road, because they will then sort of evangelize your workplace as a good place to go. So I think the number one thing to do to attract talent is actually make sure that your existing talent is well treated, and they they're vocal advocates of your workplace culture. And, behind that obviously is making sure that people are paid fairly, that the work environment isn't toxic, that you're respectful of, all the different sort of like boundaries that you would place in a workplace that people value, right? Your value system is aligned and people, and it resonates with the people that are there. So I think number one for us is by and large, using our existing workforce as a recruitment tool, by making sure we have a workplace culture that aligns with a place that people generally want to work. Second, we recognize that opportunity isn't equally distributed. I think, everybody can kind of take that statement as a fair statement. And so with that, we try to be unconventional in our recruiting. I don't necessarily care if you have a college degree or not. I don't care what background you came from. I don't care if you came from the best school. I know that personally, I've been in disadvantaged positions when applying for jobs relative to others, but that doesn't necessarily mean I'm not the right person for the job. So we try to eliminate bias in the way that we choose talent. And so by reducing kind of the friction and the barrier to entry for roles at the ZIG, it helps attract people who say, you know what, I can take a shot at this. I may not have the conventional background for a software engineer, but I'm going to go ahead and give it a shot and see. And then off the back of that, we're not risk averse when we're hiring. We'll take a chance on someone and then we'll know that we can cultivate their talent. But what they need to bring is raw talent, raw passion over talent, right? So we look for people who are passionate about learning and passionate about doing what they want to do, and then we'll cultivate that. But I'd say, the two main points there are leveraging existing employees to be champions and advocates of your workplace. That tends to be a really, really good recruiting engine. And then looking for talent in unconventional places, and making sure that sort of your benefits package and your culture are part of your story that you tell when people want to hear about where you could potentially employ them.
Thank you, Chris. Those are great answers. It brought to mind a tangential question, which is, what are the bottlenecks that you face in finding these individuals, particularly, I guess, speaking to Musonda's point about so like higher value or harder to find talent? Like, what are the channels? What are the bottlenecks in the channels, basically?
There are various types of organizations in various stages of development, and even just in various industries. So it's very rare that you are going to be able to pay top dollar for every single person that you may want within your organization. But that doesn't mean that you don't necessarily need those skills. But like I said, for certain roles, there are situations where the market demand exceeds the talent. So you really, really have to dig deep, either in your pockets or in your imagination, to figure out how you're going to cultivate and actually retain this talent. So I've found that there are numerous avenues that you can go through this. So for example, if you are unable to offer a very competitive net wage, there are certain people who might prefer a bit more flexibility or a few more leave days and things like that. So the various levers that you're able to leverage. But yeah, money. I think that's what I've found to be the biggest hiccup in all of this.
All right. I think I'm going to agree more. There's a lot that goes with the kind of remuneration that you give. But I've also learned that, expectations is another big one. There are times, especially if you're a growing organization, you put out yourself, you sort of advertise yourself extremely well. And then the expectation of the people that you bring on also that you're big. For example, you brand yourself as an international company or an international brand, and everybody sees it from that point of view. But when they get into the point of this is what we're bringing you on for, then it becomes demotivating motivation to that employee or that person that comes in. So what we've learned to do to curb that, for example, is that we, for example, in our adverts, we are very clear about the amount, which is like a big deal, the big perk, the money. We are also quite clear about the extra perks that are in there. And then we also try to be clear about some of the expectations that people have. The other bottleneck, I think, in my perspective, and this is borrowing from, I think 2 years ago, when a lot of the statutory changes were made onto like payment systems, is policy. Sometimes you might have very good packages planned, very innovative ways of paying your people, but then statutory comes your way and it's statutory, you have to follow it. So sometimes it doesn't always go well with the employee expectations or any kind of talent that you're attracting, and that becomes a bottleneck in itself. And also, I think understanding a business in itself, I think founders, like a lot of us who try as much as possible always to prove that there's a direction where we're going. So even when you know money is not there, you always have positivity that it's coming. So you have a lot of people under you that are expecting it. And if it's not there, if it's not revenue making, and you're expecting a lot of grants or something like that, and it doesn't work out and falls out, if you haven't prepped your people well, then you get to lose even the people you're attracting. So those are just some of the few I can share.
I think a bottleneck to hiring for us is, like was pointed out, being able to spread the word. There's quite a few people. So when I go out and I'm recruiting, we try to recruit across the continent. But one area where Zambia is falling behind, I feel, is not enough people are using sort of your digital resume, which is the de facto sort of LinkedIn profile. Not enough people are going out and creating LinkedIn profiles. So I'll post a job for the Zambian market and I'll get a lot of Nigerians, Indians, Kenyans applying. But the pool of applicants is actually significantly smaller in the Zambian market. And I think people aren't leveraging those tools. So it becomes, you basically have 3 places where you can post a job: LinkedIn, Facebook, or Twitter. And I'm sure you can get creative and post other places as well. But I think people need to get accustomed to creating professional digital profiles of themselves that paint a good picture of their capabilities. That can be a bottleneck to reaching talent in different places, because there's just no mass distribution of the job postings. Now, having said that, there is high unemployment, and so you get a lot of applicants. I see this as sort of another bottleneck, because it creates a lot of noise in your pipeline for talent. So hiring the right people or attracting the right people can be really difficult in an environment where most people are looking for any job, right? So you spend a disproportionate amount of time filtering through talent that may not necessarily be applicable to the job, because people are sort of desperate for a job, and so they're applying for whatever is out there, or they'll say they're willing to learn. And so you have a lot of noise in your pipeline, which can make it hard to find and attract the right talent. But by far and large, I would echo the sentiments about policy. And then second, I think the sentiment around just a lack of people using the tools available to them, like LinkedIn, to create profiles of themselves that can help employers make easier decisions around hiring.
It's a great answer. Regina?
So our bottleneck for Asikana Network is pretty much everything that all 3 panelists have said, but in a different order. So ours would not even be money. I know I'll be tarred and feathered for this, but we do have an issue of funds. But like I said, with us, we learned 4 years into this thing that the money was nice, but we didn't know how to use it. So the problem that we have is actually finding women who are interested in taking part in a lot of our projects. We have hundreds of opportunities and scholarships every single year that go unanswered. Women just don't apply for them. We've had this issue, in fact, for 9 years, that this hasn't changed whether we rebranded or not. So we often And Chris can attest to this, because recently we talked about getting talent from Asikana network and taking it to the ZIG, and he failed to find somebody, despite the fact that my organization has now reached over 10,000 women. Not a single applicant wanted to take it up, because they said, and this is something they told me in confidence, it's an intimidating position to apply for. And this is something that I encounter with women. So for me, that is my bottleneck, where you have to, you nurture these women and give them the confidence to say, listen, just apply. Well, I know that they're asking for someone who is probably, you know, well seasoned in a particular field, but you never know. And they're saying they want a graphic designer, you draw. You can learn on the job. I have this problem a lot. And of course, we have the policy issue. We've tried to work around this one by partnering with government as much as we can, and we started to feel less friction in that area. So in specifically my line of work, in order for me to have reached, we've now reached 6 out of the 10 provinces in Zambia. The only reason we reached those provinces is because we decided to make enough noise for government to say, we need you. And I think that we need a little bit of us as well. So in order for us to reach these other provinces, please count on us and we'll make ourselves available. And that's how we started to get this partnership with ZICTA and mostly Ministry of Education. So my bottleneck would be money second, I think, but honestly for me, that's why I really talk about mentorship. It's for the women to actually be able to see that I can apply for that job and I can apply for this scholarship. Sometimes it's school, it's not always jobs. We have all of these companies and organizations around the world that inbox us and say, we have 10 applications open. They don't even have to have gone to school. We just need their name. Tell them to just send us their name and say, I'm a member of Asikana Network. You would be surprised at how often we get calls back from the organization saying, we got 0 applications from Asikana Network. And then the founders themselves, the staff themselves, end up applying for these opportunities because you want to maintain the relationship with the, you know, with an organization. And this is, people always ask, like, you guys are always in school, Chichi is doing her PhD. Yeah, because nobody else is applying and you really want to maintain that relationship, but we're not happy about it. I would love to have a room full of women who had opportunities presented to them from the organization and they were able to take them up and actually continue. I don't take any pride in saying I've actually applied for a lot of these opportunities simply to maintain a cordial relationship with the university, and I take up their masters simply because of that. I know I don't have time. I'm doing 2 at the moment for this reason, because nobody in my organization would apply. So my bottleneck is all of that, but in very different orders, I think.
Something that was interesting that Chris said is about misalignment of you know, skills and the jobs that are, for example, put online. I feel like that's a really big deal. You know, you'll find that we're putting out a management job and then somebody, and I'm not demeaning, a 12th grader applies. And it feels kind of sad to see that. So, and then the total opposite of it is, for example, we're in the agricultural sector. We want a lot of ladies to take up jobs, field jobs, and these require them, for example, to ride bikes or being in the community and that kind of stuff. And granted, they will get the job and we assess them. Passion is great, you can read it and you bring them on board, but they only last a week in the community and they're up. The simple answer is, oh, I expected to be in the office, or I expected to be, you know, away from the field more. So sometimes desire and what is put out there doesn't match. And then you really have to now spend more time trying to tweak this or getting the people that you did not desire for the job. It draws you back. So some of those are the bottlenecks. You find that a lot of turnover is at the point which you really want to mentor and move talent from like the field into management jobs, but just the patience is not there. And then, you know, you get a lot of that hurdle. So I think that's just what I found interesting from Chris's point of view.
Chris?
Yeah, so, you know, I was going to piggyback on Regina's comments there. I think one of the things that I've seen as well is, besides the misalignment of talent, I think what we're also seeing is people are pursuing, you know, when you say there's a shortage, it's because you don't have alignment in sort of like the training or or formal education for the jobs that you're seeking, right? So we don't necessarily look for software engineers or people who've studied computer science, but we look for people who are passionate about that. But one of the things that can be sort of a red herring for us is, you know, there's people who will go out and get certifications or be misleading in applications that will, you know, force us to sort of make the difficult decision of saying, hey, perhaps you're not actually ready for this job at the time that you are applying, right? So, and to be, I guess, more direct about that, you know, we'll see a lot of people chasing awards and chasing certifications. And a lot of these certifications, if you're in the industry, you know that most of these exams, you know, the answers are out there and people can find them. And so they'll go and they'll memorize answers, they'll get a certification, and they'll apply for a job that they're not qualified for. And again, it speaks back to that sort of high unemployment. So you do what is necessary. But unfortunately, especially in a field like software engineering, very, very quickly, you can tell whether that person actually has that skill set or not, or whether they memorize some answers. And so that also, you know, becomes a separate bottleneck of sorts, because you end up hiring someone that's misaligned, that's not a great fit, and you waste a lot of resources and time doing that, and then you have to go back and recruit to fill that position again. So, you know, a little bit of both of what Regina said and Musonda said, but that's been a big issue as well. People chasing awards or you know, falsifying credentials, and that effectively not being you know, being found out, you know, like a month or so later, and then that wastes time on both sides.
Some really insightful feedback there from everyone. And I think one of the things that came to my mind as you were all giving your answers is how this relates to Zambia's entrepreneurial ecosystem as a whole. Because you are either, if you're in Zambia, competing with multinationals potentially, or you're looking to compete against multinationals outside of Zambia, or you're trying to compete for capital. And again, you're going to be compared with alternatives elsewhere. So how does Zambia's talent, as it sits today, compare against what is available elsewhere?
I think Zambians are very talented people. I feel so privileged to have been in this space for over 9 years, because I've gotten to see so much. The only problem that I tend to always be very vocal about when it comes to Zambian talent is that we do not want to learn more. So I'll give an example of a field that I'm comfortable in, because this is what I learned. In IT, you cannot be comfortable having learned just one language 10, 15 years ago when you went to college. It's reckless, nobody's gonna hire you. So every year you need to make it a point to learn something new. Like, I say this to all the doors in my network. Like this year, it's the trending language is Python. Get online and learn, or learn from each other. You can always learn that. I find that a lot of the talent in the Zambian community is they don't want to learn something new. I have a lot of friends, especially from West Africa, and one thing I've noticed about them is that they will scoop up every opportunity. They'll look at the job opportunity and say, we're looking for a Python programmer. This guy last programmed when it was Kobo or something. These are languages that we learned only in textbook. And he will spend 48 hours preparing and learning that language. I don't see a lot of that in Zambia. And maybe if we did, even if you're not qualified, I think me and Chris would be like, okay, yes, you're not qualified, but you know what, you have the passion. And you told us something actual factual as we interviewed you for the job. But what I find is that someone will just indicate, even on a LinkedIn post, I can do this job, and then we'll sit back. In the interviews, they don't even have the decency to remember the name of the company, what the company does. You know, they're just expecting to get these jobs simply because, oh, I'm a youth, or I fall into a minority group or something like that. So I have a very big problem with that, the Zambian talent when it comes to that. It is there. I love how hardworking Zambian people are, but I feel like we need to make an effort in actually learning to move forward. A lot of us think very backwards, and it comes back to bite us, really.
I think to potentially add on to what Regina has said, yes, I agree that we have a lot of talent in Zambia, and I think this also then echoes back to what Chris said. But basically, we don't put ourselves out there. I have a blog, it's called Musonda Speaks HR, and the past 2-3 jobs I've gotten are based on people who saw me put a video out there talking about how to write a CV or something like that. And people don't understand the value of putting yourself and your knowledge out there, because maybe you're the most brilliant person in the world, but if it's all in your head and you actually haven't bothered to share any of this with anyone, then it almost doesn't matter. And then I think the second way in which Zambian talent, while being basically as good as the rest of the world, somewhat falls behind, is this inability to be agile and change and shift. What do I mean by this? When we look at the 21st century, first we had the dot-com bubble burst, and then we had the global economy crisis, and now we have the COVID-19 pandemic. What this tells us is workplaces and organizations are constantly changing. They're constantly facing different problems. You make the strategic plan in January, and by March, yeah, it would be something completely different. So it's well and good to be a lawyer, an administrative expert, to be an HR manager, but at the end of the day, everyone still needs to have problem-solving skills. Everyone still needs to have a growth mindset. Everyone still needs to be able to be a critical thinker. And yeah, while we have this base talent, I think we sometimes lack these softer skills that are required to constantly be able to shift when the organization shifts, or shift when the environment shifts, that then allows you to actually make an impact to the organization you're working with.
I think I would like to agree with Sunda's point on just having this culture of agility and just be there to pivot, especially when crisis hits. I think one of the learnings that we've had, especially now with the COVID looming, is that a lot of people had routine jobs or routine tasks and stuff like that that have also been taken away by the pandemic, and they can't really survive without that. But just to add on, I think with a bit of my thoughts is there's one thing that always strikes me. I'll tell you, I've only been employed at a very short time. I only worked for something that's not mine for about 3 months. But when I got in there, the kind of advice I got into the workspace was the moment you get a job, start planning your exit, which made sense at the time, because you are always trying to think of where to go next and get your next line on the CV. And that's something that got me thinking. In Zambia, one of the things that we're really good at, and institutions are pretty good at it, is designing a lot of us as Zambian students to get the job. Keeping the job is another skill set. It's another task, and I think it takes a lot of dedication and passion to love what you do and keep it for the long haul. Now, I think to the question, Zambia has a lot of talent, and I'll tell you, a lot of people are passionate about having jobs. Again, it goes back to the point that I made. Keeping it is the harder deal. So you find that little things will demotivate a lot of the Zambian employees that you get on. So you get the talent, you get the good search, but then they'll not grasp something simple in Excel, and that can throw them off into what they've really been originally been employed for. So those are simple skills that you see if you hire somebody foreign or somebody from out there. It adds to things like grit and just basic confidence, which I feel like a lot of, I think, institutions should build. And I like that a lot of institutions have brought in some of these smaller, softer skills that are really relevant when you get into the workspace. The other thing I think is just the sort of the sheer value that goes with the work. It's nice to be employed, it's nice to have a job, but you really also need to value what the employer or the organization has with it. And this is why I think it's always nice to know that when you're hiring, I think one thing I learned in my days of hiring is that you are hiring for character and then training for skill. So a lot of people, this passion will be shown exactly at the time that you are employing. And if you find the right character, you can easily build them up to stay, and you can easily build their skills, and those skills can be really relevant in the workplace. But then if you look at the skills, you might be getting somebody that doesn't really have the value. They can do all the work. And that's what I see a lot with the Zambian tasks. So sometimes if I'm and I'm speaking from history, not going forward, but sometimes when we're hard pressed about getting a certain skill that needs the task to be done, we hire, but then we know they're not going to stay long. You can almost see the graph of when they're exiting. So that's another thing that I'll just add there. Thanks.
Chris?
Yeah, so the question being, where's Zambia's talent right now relative to the rest of the world, correct?
Yes.
So at the risk of offending the nation, I think there just needs to be a general recognition that there's work to be done. We have a lot of raw talent and a lot of really hungry talent out there as well. There's people that, I have people on my team right now who've just like blown me away with the level of growth that they're able to exhibit and achieve when given the opportunity. So from a sheer raw talent perspective, there's a lot to work with, like a lot of good raw material to work with, right? So a lot of untapped potential. But I think having the humility as a country, as a people, as whatever, as a collective, to say we can do better is going to be what's critical. Because when we look at, for example, in my industry specifically, when we offer professional services around technology, our biggest competitor is going to be Eastern Europe and India, right? And you'll find that you have a highly educated workforce in those areas coming from those countries. So most of our Indian counterparts have their master's degree in some sort of computer, some sort of STEM related field, right? And that's our competition. So having the humility to say, do our institutions, right? Our institutions, can they hold a candle to the Eastern European institutions and the Indian institutions in those same fields, right? Can a master's degree in computer science from Zambia, from a university in Zambia, compare to a master's degree in computer science in India or in Poland? And so having that honest conversation with ourselves and saying, are we there yet, is going to be critical for us to actually figure out what the next steps and what the next investments should be in bridging that gap. And the reality is there is a gap. There's a serious gap, and sometimes that gap can be filled with raw talent and people who are passionate, but that may not necessarily be the case. I think our institutions need to do a better job of preparing us for the jobs of the future. So I would say the talent, again, a lot of good raw material, but a long way to go to kind of bridge the gap with competitiveness relative to the rest of the world. And then, I would echo some of the previous sentiments around sort of the hard work it takes beyond just getting the job, right? I think you see a lot of enthusiasm and energy to get a job. You don't see the same level of enthusiasm and energy to keep that job or advance in that job if things get a little bit harder, right? So, when presented with friction, I think having the resilience to push through barriers and being able to sort of innovate around problems, critical thinking, those are all things that are going to be critical for Zambia to bridge the gap. I think the critical thinking part really resonated with me. I think what I see a lot of is people are able to regurgitate information, but then the problem solving and critical thinking if you just herald back to the way that we were taught, basic times table or like your addition, 1 + 1 is 2, 2 + 2, you're just like memorizing and repeating and memorizing and repeating, but you're not thinking about how problems are solved. And so I think, again, I would probably chalk that up to re-looking at our institutions and how we teach as a root cause for helping, cultivate and bridge the gap between our capacity as a nation versus the capacity of others when comparing apples to apples.
Thank you. I think that's a great point. I think the quality of our institutions, the quality of our ability to instruct, teach, and build skills ultimately is what creates good talent. That's what enables us to be competitive as organizations, as a country, and progress ourselves. So on that note, I'd like to end this session because we've actually hit our time. Thank you to everybody on the panel for participating. I think you've made a lot of insightful statements and have hopefully contributed towards progressing this issue. Thank you also to our host, Nabi, for this opportunity. I hope everybody here has a great afternoon. Thank you.